Welcome to the webinar, Team Transformers, Habit Heroes at Work. This lecture is being presented by Martin R. Mendelson, FIA, DFE, CPC, and we are going to begin shortly. And with that, it is my distinct honor to introduce Dr. Martin Mendelson. He is the founder of Metamorphosis Coaching and former resident faculty at Spear Education, has over 20 years of experience and certifications in executive team coaching, facilitation, emotional intelligence, and happiness studies. Martin has empowered leaders and teams across North America to excel and thrive. As a captivating speaker, coach, and masterful facilitator, he unleashes the power of his team approach, TEAM, guiding clients to shed the burdens of traditional leadership and embrace cohesion for unparalleled growth and fulfillment. His first book, published by New York City-based Morgan James, will be out later this year, and he is a newly appointed executive contributor to Brains Magazine. And with that, it is my pleasure to say, take it away, Dr. Mendelson.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica. It's really been a pleasure to work with you over these last 3 webinars. And for those of you who've joined us before, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome to you. And I do invite everyone to go back and listen to the previous 2 webinars on the science of optimism/happiness. And then number 2 was all about the fundamentals of difficult conversations, because gosh knows those crop up on a regular basis now, don't they? And so, as in the first 2 series, as in the first 2 webinars in this series, there will be a small amount of review on my background and certain core fundamental concepts that encompasses the body of my work that I review in any lecture. However, this will be a very small percent of the whole, because tonight we're going to be talking about habit heroes at work. And so, when I started practicing, when I graduated in 1996, I never imagined that I would be sitting here with you all this evening, all across North America. And when I was in practice, this was my reality that you see on the screen. That's my nephew, Stephen, looking out the office window about 22 years ago. And I never intended to have a life outside clinical dentistry, but frankly, the universe had different plans for me. And just shy of 10 years into my clinical career, I started having issues with my hand. And within 6 months of the apparentness of those first symptoms, I was out of the practice of dentistry for good. And so from that day, I was out of work for 17 months. Try to find a job when you're in your mid to late 30s, when Google didn't really exist the way it is today, and you're too experienced for this and too inexperienced for that and too old for this and too young for that. And in my in-person keynotes, I talk about a defining moment when my career and my life changed forever, a moment of sheer panic that my clinical life was over, and what ultimately saved me was a single thought. And we will be talking about thoughts today in light of how those thoughts lead you to become a habit hero. And today, many people know me as this guy, as I jokingly say, the short guy with the bow tie. And just to kind of wrap up background for those of you who are new here, what happened after those 17 months? Well, I ended up working for a dental laboratory. I actually worked for what is today NDX Clearwater. And I actually facilitated discussions around 16,000, yes, I counted, outbound cases that the lab was serving for their client dentists. After that, I worked for Vita in North America, serving educational needs across North America, ran a team of over 20 individuals, ran a budget of well in excess of $20 million. And in 2011, as Jessica shared with you, I joined Spear Education. I'm extremely proud of my tenure that I had at Spear, helping to grow the faculty club organization and the study club organization to what it is today. And as Jessica also indicated, I hold quite a number of certifications that I garnered during my tenure at Spear, everything from executive coaching to happiness studies. And so I've been in your shoes. I've been the assistant as a kid. I've been the dentist. I've been in corporate. I've been at the lab. I've been in education. I've led teams of 2 to 22, budgets of over $20 million. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about habits. Now, habits, as you're going to find out very shortly, has a very interesting dental origin. And this is a bit comprehensive of a discussion. And you're going to leave, or shall I say, you've been provided with a handout that is going to guide you through this process. But look, if you have any questions, as often happens as you start to engage with what I'm about to teach you, please don't be a stranger. There's my QR code. It gives you access to everything that I'm doing today, my email, my social media. If you want to get on the wait list for my upcoming book, whose manuscript was submitted today, I might add, I would love to further connect with you. Now, tonight, I'm going to be your self-appointed coach. I've said this in the other webinars. And a coach, a true coach, helps build a bridge to get you to somewhere else. Let's say from A to B, whatever B is for you. And I'm going to do so via making you think, challenging you, and asking certain challenging questions. And one of the differences between the other webinars and this evening is the handout is to be used as a learning map or a road map to help you go from concept to execution as it relates to habits. So my promise to you is that this is going to be all killer, no filler. You're going to leave with tips, tricks, and tools so that you can understand the science of habits, how to implement that science and those methodologies for anything in your practice or in your personal life. My challenge to you, however, is I invite you to leave your yeah buts at the door, to have an open mind, to understand that the handout's purpose is for you to kind of jump into at a later date. And thanks to NDX, you will have access to this recording if you would like to go back and review certain elements of habit science. And at the end of our time today, and frankly, at the end of this third of 3 webinars, I'm going to offer you several gifts, true gifts that are free of any kind of obligation whatsoever, because I want to help you in whatever way I can. And so let's start on our journey of habit heroes this evening, how to become a habit hero. And what you might find interesting, as I do, is the understanding of what a habit actually is. And when you look at the definition of what a habit actually is, it might surprise you to some degree. Because what a habit is actually the things that you do automatically in response to a given time and place or situation. So in essence, the habit itself is something that you do over and over again. Ready for this? For the purpose of performing the action itself. So what I want you to understand here is that the habit is the activity, not the result. So oftentimes we talk about habits in relation to the result. So getting in shape, losing a couple pounds, reading more, taking more time with family, those are actually results. So it's actually the habit that leads to the result. And so to put this in humanistic terms, I'm sure you're all familiar with the concept of New Year's resolutions. I know you are. And one of the more common New Year's resolutions statistically is going back or going to the gym more. Now, how many of you might know the percentage, according to Forbes magazine, of people that fail said New Year's resolution? I'm curious if you want to go ahead and put in the chat what percentage you think people actually fail at achieving their New Year's resolutions. Now, according to Forbes, it is 80%. So many of you were quite close. But here's the more interesting fact, in my humble opinion. By what month do people fail? This to me is fascinating. The month that they fail, the majority of them, is February. And so here's the thing. If you want to be great, you need great habits because the habit is going to lead to greatness however you define that. And the antithesis is also true. Poor habits make for poor performance. Now, you might say to yourself, Martin, what the heck does this have to do with dental practice? Actually, everything. Because I'm going to look at you in all candor and say, Every single thing you do is technically a habit. That's why I defined what a habit actually is by definition, because the habit is the process. You have processes for checking patients in, checking patients out, bringing patients back, treating patients during X, Y, Z procedures. You have processes for how you send cases to a lab, how you have them come back from a lab. Make sense? So, what we're going to be actually talking about tonight is a really important concept called habit integration or habit stacking, which we will talk in detail later. Because what I want you to understand is what I'm not looking for you to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over. Actually, quite the opposite. I want to start to get into your head to get you to understand that any change within your life will be most substantively achieved by understanding how you're going to integrate that into your life. And so to this end, in the handout, toward the beginning, there are two singleton pages. One is for a personal habit and one is for a practice habit. And what I challenge you to think about is what is in your personal life that you would like to start, change, or optimize. The example I'm giving is increasing water intake to 90 ounces a day. So that would be a change because you're already doing it. It's not that you need to start it. And if a practice habit might be hold daily huddles with the team. Well, if you're not doing them now, that would be start. If you're only doing them here and there, that would be change. And if you want to make them more efficient, that would be optimize. And so I very much understand, if you're paying attention, that you might actually describe the habit at this phase as the outcome versus the process, but that's totally okay. We need to start somewhere, and it's most easy to start with the end goal in mind. So once you've completed those and put your stake in the ground, and by the way, writing these down are incredibly important. We talked about this in a previous webinar relative to the statistics of goal achievement if you simply write it down as a starting point. So exercise number one, that's toward the back half of the handout, is going to challenge you to answer a couple questions. What are the two habits that you picked? Why did you select them? Like, who cares to you? And number three, what would it mean to you if you could engage in these habits regularly? How would it impact your life? And so, one of my favorite books, we're going to talk about several tonight, but the primary is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about the idea that there are three layers of a habit change there's the outcome, the process, and then the identity. What he further goes to explain is this: many of us are focused on outcome-based habits. We want to increase case acceptance, or we want to increase production, or we want to lose 15 pounds, or we want to eat healthier. And so you're focused on the outcome, then the process, then you feel good about yourself and identify as a person who was able to achieve it. What Mr. Clear says, and what I also very firmly believe, is that we need to flip this on its head. And you're going to see later that my leadership and team facilitation philosophy, ironically, follows this concept hook, line, and sinker. What Mr. Clear says is that we need to focus on who we are as a person. Why is this important to us? Then decide on the process of how we're going to achieve said identity. And then, therefore, we will have an outcome. So this is an inside out approach. So as Mr. Clear would say to you, quote, the ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes part of your identity. So is it, I am the type of person who wants to achieve greater production? Or is it, I'm the type of person who values comprehensive dentistry that leads to production? Another way to put it from a secular example would be, is it the number on the scale or is it the person getting on the scale? Now, we've so far been focusing, whether you might have realized it or not, on the individual brain, the individual's intrinsic motivating factors. But who are you as a team? Because the truth of the matter is, what comprises the dental practice is the team. Fair? And so I'm sure you've heard the phrase, There is no I in team, right? But you know what is in team? Me. And all the me's within your organization, your practice, bear responsibility. And we need to understand habit science in order to bring us together so we can achieve those outcomes by focusing on our identity as a practice. Now, in your handout is a fill in the blank for my team concept. And we did review this in the other lectures, the webinars as part of this series. So I'm not going to go into the same level of detail. But for those of you who are new to us, basically we played a game and I asked you to think about your dearest friend that you don't live with. And we talked about the idea that that person didn't respond to a text message for over a week. And we said, okay, this is your bestie. Of course, you're going to be worried about them, but let's put those thoughts over here for a minute. And we all agreed that, minus those thoughts of care and concern, if someone doesn't text you back that you care about, you'd be like, what's wrong? Do they not care about me? Do they not like me anymore? I saw you on Instagram or Facebook going to dinner with the Joneses, but somehow you don't have time to text me back, which will drive emotions of anger and frustration, which will drive actions of maybe sending an angry or passive aggressive text, which may or may not manifest in maintaining or elevating said dearest friendship. Then I flipped the equation and we talked about, then you find out that something happened to your bestie. Now your thoughts are of, oh my gosh, what can I do? How can I help? Your emotions of love, care, and concern kick in. Actions of service kick in, and that manifests maintaining or elevating said dearest friendship differently. Let's flip this to a dental example. You have a team member that keeps coming in late, and it frustrates you, rightfully so. And you get in your car and you think, oh, what kind of day are we going to have today? Are they going to be late again today? And it drives an emotion of anxiety and fear, if we really want to call it what it is, meaning you're not going to have a full team to do what you need to do. It's going to drive an action of potentially inaction if you're thinking that you can't maintain the relationship and have the conversation. Hint, hint, go look at last webinar. But how does that manifest actually eliminating the problem? It doesn't work so well now, does it? And so the point here is that this mindset stuff is as important in communication as it is in habits. Because if these habits aren't actually being followed through with, then we're not going to be able to achieve the outcomes as a basis of our identity in our practice. And so Mr. Clear says that your outcomes are actually lagging measures of your habits. Net worth of financial habits, knowledge of learning habits, weight of eating habits. Your practice success is a lagging measure of your patient communication habits, your case acceptance discussion habits, your financial discussion habits. So this stuff is not fluff. They're simply humanistic traits that if we can apply it to dentistry, can change the face of our practice. And so in exercise number 2, we want to go a little bit deeper. We want to think about your identity statement because the greatest form of intrinsic motivation comes from your identity. So I'm a person who what? Values doing XYZ. How committed are you to that change? Scale from 1 to 10. 1, not at all. 10, 100%. And why did you give it the number you gave it? So let's say you give it a 6 and you're like, well, I gave it a 6 because I'm worried about overcoming this barrier. Well, great. What are you going to do about it? Coach Martin would ask you. So yeah, your outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. So let's talk about the origin of habits, the science of habits, and how you can facilitate change in your practice. And buckle up because believe it or not, the science of habits has a dental origin, believe it or not. So I want you to picture yourself in bed this morning by yourself or with your spouse, what have you. And let me ask you something. What's one of the first things you do when you get up in the morning? I mean, other than maybe going to the bathroom or maybe checking your phone like you see on the screen. I know what the answer is. You know what the answer is? One of the first things you do almost universally, you brush your teeth. Why do you do that? By the way, the answer is not because you're a dental professional, believe it or not. The answer has everything to do with habits. And there is a connection to habit science that is used in every marketing department on the planet that comes from our little old profession. So, do you happen to know who this guy is? You should. His name is Claude C. Hopkins. And I came upon Mr. Hopkins when I was reading my next favorite book about habits, The Power of Habit. And before I tell you who this man is and what he did, we need to talk about where the state of oral health was in the United States around World War I. So around the time of World War I, when the United States instituted a draft, we discovered something. We knew, we had a mandate, the military did, that you needed a minimum of 12 teeth in your head to serve as a member of the armed forces. Well, guess what? 24 out of every 100 recruits was rejected for not having enough teeth. Now, this wasn't a US problem. In Britain, 70% of the British soldiers and the men at home in the same age bracket of 18 to 35 were in need of significant dental treatment. To make things more interesting, US dental officers performed, you ready for this? Over 380,000 extractions to servicemen in World War I. And when the US entered World War I in 1917, the Army only had 86 dental officers, but by the end of the war, we had over 4,600 dental officers. So, what was going on? Why were people's, in this case men's, teeth falling out of their head? Well, it's a very simple answer. They didn't care. Nobody brushed their teeth because it was just simply accepted that your teeth were going to rot out of your head. So why brush your teeth? So before Claude C. Hopkins, in the United States, only 7% of Americans own toothpaste, or tooth powder to be more exact. Now, let's get real here for a minute. How many of you have gone to Walgreens or CVS or Rite Aid or Walmart, whatever, and you buy something and you stick it under the sink and you never use it again? So I truly wonder what the real percentage was. Was it 2%, 5%? I don't know. But a decade after he did what he did, which I'm about to tell you, 65% of Americans had toothpaste in their bathroom. And by World War II, the military downgraded their concerns, the national health emergency, about recruits' teeth because so many soldiers were brushing their teeth every day. How the heck did they do that? Why did this happen? And how can you learn from this? Well, that's what Mr. Hopkins did. What Mr. Hopkins did before the internet, shoot, before television, was that he created the following marketing campaigns. Two examples of a larger campaign are on your screen. He created a desire for your teeth to pass the tongue test. He created a desire to have a clean mouth taste for hours. He's been quoted as saying, "I've made $1 million off Pepsodent" around World War II. He also said that I've learned the right human psychology. And as described in The Power of Habit, there were two primary factors, two physiologic basic rules that he discovered. Number one, you have to find a simple and obvious cue. And number two, you need to clearly identify the rewards. And if you get those elements right, it's like magic. So the basic habit loop that Hopkins created was with 3 elements. The more modern version that's in your handout has 4. We're going to get there next. The original habit loop was cue, routine, reward. The cue was getting up in the morning. The routine was brushing your teeth. The reward was the clean mouth taste for hours. And in Duhigg's book, they talk about the neurological research, the psychological research, that doing this routine actually causes chemical changes in your brain to create what Duhigg calls a neurological craving and the anticipation of the reward, which is actually what pushes you forward when you're faced or presented with a specific cue. I'm going to repeat that because this is really important. You have or you create a neurological craving for the anticipation of the reward that pushes you forward when you are presented with a specific cue. So this is the modern interpretation of that original habit loop. You have a cue, you have a craving for the reward, a neurological craving. You then therefore respond in a given routine, and then you have the reward for achieving said outcome. So, many of you may be sitting there with a glass of wine, beer, or cocktail. Let's talk about that for a minute. Human beings come home from a long day at the office, in our case, practice. That's the cue. You come home. The craving is relaxation. The routine or response is having a drink or two. And the reward is that feeling of relaxation or the buzz. So I want to make an important point here because this goes to application. Although we call it a habit loop, there are 4 stages, just simply the stages in the loop, and they are linear according to time. You come upon the cue, it causes the craving, it creates the response, it then generates the reward. Now, this is not unique to dentistry. I want to give you an additional fun historical example of a product that I know you're familiar with. Do you happen to know who Mr. Drake Stimson is? Well, you don't know him. Well, let me tell you something. He invented something that I almost guarantee is in your house or your practice. He invented this stuff. Does that help? Probably not. But you know what this is? This is a representation of a chemical formula that Procter and Gamble developed, or shall I say Mr. Simpson developed, working for Procter and Gamble in 1996. It was a very special chemical that eliminated odors in the air and rendered them odorless. It had no scent to it. It simply took odors and rendered them odorless. Great idea, huh? But there ended up being a huge problem in sales of the product initially and how they marketed it. So, have you ever been to somebody's house, and I don't mean to offend anybody here, that has 24 cats or smokes or has a bunch of gerbils? And if it's not your house, you can smell it, but often the people in the home are what are called nose blind to those scents. So this company was making this product with a reward of eliminating scents and not actually doing anything about it, i.e., giving you a nice scent to follow. And they were marketing it with this slogan: gets bad smells out of fabrics. Well, if you're nose blind, do you even know that you need to get the bad smells out of fabrics? And even if you did, you'd buy the product, use it once, and do what? Put it under your sink. And so they switched to a different idea around cleans life's smells. Anybody have an idea what product I'm talking about? This has been discussed in business schools for the last almost 30 years. Because when they first started selling this, having spent millions of dollars in R&D, it tanked. They almost pulled it off the market. You got it, Elizabeth. We're talking about Febreze. And so what would be the natural cue? Well, the cue would be you want to clean. The routine would be you'd use Febreze, and then the reward is what? Because the original product didn't have a scent in it. Or if it did, it was very low concentration. And this brings me back to the concept of dental practice, because we need to be mindful of what we're rewarding, particularly in a clinical setting. And so the other dose of reality is that change doesn't happen overnight because we're talking about getting everybody on the same page. And I want to make a statement to you that I've been making, particularly since the new year has turned, which is this. When our patients are in the chair and they're reclined and their mouth is open, what we do is 1,000,000% unique. But everything that gets them in the chair, gets them accepting treatment in the chair itself, and everything that gets them out of the chair and paying their bill is not. And so we need to understand that, respect that, embrace that, and use science, research, and lessons from other professions to help us move forward. Because when you look to change something in your practice, unless it's something extraordinarily simple, it doesn't happen overnight. Is that fair? I think so. So, what Mr. Clear talks about is the mathematical reality of change, and that you don't have to move a mountain on a given Wednesday to facilitate change. If you can even improve anything by 1% per day, by the end of a given year, you will improve mathematically by 37%. Or as I like to say, one will always and forevermore be greater than zero. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go a little deeper on your roadmap. Now, we're going to go into more detail here in a moment, but I want to start getting you thinking. Your two habits that you picked, what's the cue? I.e., when in your life would you be stimulated to go, oh yeah, I need to do this? What's the craving? Like, why do you want to do it? And what will be the response, your routine? And what's the reward? So I want you to think about that as I explain this even further. Because here's the thing. Nobody believes that you're going to go to the gym once and become buff. Nobody believes that you save, let's say, $1,000 one month and you're going to instantly become a millionaire. I also would bet that you don't believe that change can happen in your practice overnight. And what Mr. Clear would say is good habits make time your ally, bad habits make time your enemy. And he talks about what's called the plateau of latent potential, which I think describes dental practices to a T. So this is a graph that relates results over time or versus time. And the straight sloping line is what we think should happen, that we make a change, we tell everybody, and things will improve. Well, the reality is what actually happens is nothing really happens in the first short burst of time. Then we start getting modicums of improvement, and then zoom, if we stick with it, we then surpass what we even thought would be possible to begin with. And the gap between what we think should happen and what actually happens is what Mr. Clear calls the valley of disappointment. And so people get caught in the valley of disappointment at the gym within 30 days. 80% of them fail, and most of that 80% fail by February. So how can you fix this in a dental practice? It's by understanding, just like weight loss, that this is about systems and processes and understanding the specific cue, i.e., when we're going to go ahead and do this. Now, what I want to show you, which I haven't shown in the last couple, is my leadership philosophy. This comes from one of my certifications, and this follows Mr. Clear's philosophy of outcome versus identity habits to a T. Because what most leaders in dental practices try to do, because let's be honest with ourselves, I'm a dentist. Most of you on here likely are dentists. We're all dental professionals. We weren't trained leadership in dental school, were we? No, we weren't. And so what most leaders mistakenly try to do is they try to live in the outer dark blue circle. They're trying to drive toward outcomes. Sound familiar? They're trying to create accountability, innovation, or production, shall we say, instead of productivity. When the reality is, we need to connect with all the me's in our organization and understand team. Understand that everybody in your practice has thoughts that drive emotions, that create actions or inaction that manifest results. And we all come to the table with a beautiful thing. You know what that beautiful thing is? Different beliefs and perspectives, different values, and different purposes. That can be harnessed so that we can then go from the inside out. Once we understand who we are, then we can have team leadership in the lighter blue circle to give and receive feedback in the nature in which it was intended, to create trust and transparency, to have aligned engagement. So then, therefore, production becomes a lagging indicator of what? Of our alliance. This is something I do with dental practices. You don't need me for this. It's something I facilitate, but it's asking yourselves three questions. What kind of place do we want to show up to every day? When things get challenging, how are we going to show up? And when things go squirrely, how are we going to keep each other accountable? All of us. This is a real life alliance from Dr. Donald Anderson. There's a case study that's going to be published in Dental Economics that I wrote about Don Anderson and how he ended up navigating through insurance challenges, team challenges, COVID. And I encourage you to read that. But I hope you understand and can see now that habits are behavior, behavior is humanistic, and the humans is what drive this entire process. And if you notice, what is the Alliance focused on? The identity of the practice. What kind of person wants to show up every day? What kind of person needs to show up when there are things that are challenging? And what kind of person needs to show up when accountability needs to be upheld? It's one of the reasons why I give this lecture, because everything flows so beautifully in parallel between these humanistic and process-oriented concepts. So now let's get really tactile, shall we? I promise tips, tricks, and tools. Well, buckle up, here we go. So there are 4 laws of behavior change that mirror what you've already learned. The first is make it obvious, i.e. your cue. The second is make it attractive, i.e. your craving. Why do we want to even do this? The third is to make it easy. Now, I want to be clear here. We want to make the response or the routine, I use those terms interchangeably, easy to start. Not everything in life is easy, right? But we need to make it easy to start, and I'll explain that in a minute. And last but not least, we need to make it satisfying, i.e., we need to identify the reward. So to put it differently, number 1, when are we going to do it? Number 2, why should we do it? Number 3, how should we do it? And number 4, who the heck cares? Or what difference does it make? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a very specific example using the 4 laws of behavior change that is a dental practice example. So the first law is make it obvious. And this is about your cue. And what I want you to understand is that this is all about habit integration, the term I used in the very beginning, versus habit change. If you tell me in a practice you want to start doing X, yeah, good luck. But if you tell me that you want to start integrating a certain process, a habit, if you will, or as Mr. Clear calls it, habit stacking, you want to stack a process into and inside of an already existing one. See, that's the beauty of this discussion here, folks. You already, as we talked about before, everything in your practice is already a process and a system. What we're talking about is integrating into what already exists. So for the cue, I have a little formula for you that I developed, which is I will do X behavior at Y time in Z location. That's what a cue is, okay? So listen, the example I'm going to use is Spear's patient education videos. Look, I was with Spear for many years. We mutually parted company. They're not supporting me during this lecture here with you this evening, but I was on the ground floor. I was part of the team that saw the initial renderings of this product, and it's fantastic. And Spear does have data that shows those that use this platform on a regular basis see case acceptance increases of upwards of 20%. So look, it doesn't matter what example you're using. It could be anything. It could be talking about patient financing. It could be bringing a new technology into your office. It doesn't really matter. But if you say to me, I want to start using patient education videos, yeah, good luck with that. But if you say to me, I need to figure out a way and a time within my current patient examination or consultation process that this will fit into, well, that's a totally different story. And so saying we want to use these videos is one thing, but without understanding a habit change, where are we going to get lost? You got it, in the valley of disappointment. So we have to ask ourselves some questions. So when will the videos be shown? And what is the cue? So going along my formula around, what are we going to do at what time in what location? For this example, you may have two or three different cues. Why? Because you may have a new patient exam, a hygiene recare exam, a hygiene comprehensive exam. You get the idea. It depends how your office is structured. So the exact cue may be different for those examinations, but there's a cue nonetheless. There is a time that will be perfect to show the patient the video based upon how they present and what they actually need. So that's the cue. That's making it obvious. Number two is making it attractive. So this is super important. So here's the thing. How attractive, this is a challenging question I want to ask you. How attractive is increasing case acceptance to the team? Another way to phrase this using this example is, has everyone bought into the idea that patient education videos will help and need to be used? Or how attractive is increasing case acceptance to the team to help your patients function better, look better, be pain-free? Is there a culture in your practice where if the patient says yes, or if the patient says no, it's just another day in the office? So why is case acceptance attractive? You know the kind of cases I'm talking about. The patient who cries at the end of the insert appointment because for some large portion of their lives, they were ashamed or they were in pain. Look, case acceptance is important. Case acceptance is critical. And it's the only way that we're going to help a fellow human being. And if that's not attractive, I don't know what is, but are we going internally out of our way to communicate this mission and vision for your practice? And if you're sitting here wondering, how the heck am I going to get buy-in from our team? Well, maybe we should talk. So that's all about making it attractive. This is creating the craving. Number three is making it easy. And I have a couple interesting outside examples for this. And so making it easy, again, has everything to do with making it easy to start the process. So if you've read The Happiness Advantage by Sean Accor, which I've talked about in a multitude of these webinars, he talks about habits and the science of habits as well. And he talks about this 20-second rule and that lowering the barrier to change by just 20 seconds was all it took to help form a new life habit. So I'm going to give you his example and I'm going to give you one from my own life. His example was he created an identity statement that he wanted to be in better shape, that he was a person that cared about his health. And so for him, he wanted to go running every morning. So what he did, according to his book, is he slept in his gym clothes. Now, I don't think he slept in his shoes, but he slept in his gym clothes. So what was the cue? Getting up in the morning. What was the craving? Being true to that identity. What was the response? Putting your feet in the shoes and going out the door. And he was able to establish the running habit. What about me? Well, if you look behind me closely, there's a lot of books. I love reading. And what I do is I read in short bursts, 10 to 15 minutes every morning. Where's my book? Next to my coffee maker. I'm not making this up. This is true. So what's my cue? Making coffee. What's my craving? Finishing or starting a chapter or a book. What's the response? Picking up the book and reading. And what's the reward? The knowledge for me. So making it easy is critically important. So with these patient education videos, they happen to be shown on tablets. Why do I bring this up? I want to make a point. How many times do you think it's going to take an assistant to look for the one tablet for 5 operatories before they give up? How many times do you think it's going to take if you haven't thoroughly understood where the videos are on the tablet, or if you haven't downloaded the app and every time you use the web browser and you have to log in? And how many times do you think it's going to take to stop doing that? How many times do you think it's going to take to stop doing that if you don't have a playlist that you can create on that platform? You see what I'm saying? We have to lower the barrier to entry for something we want to do. So I hope I've made you think about this idea of integration versus stacking. The fourth and final law is making it satisfying. What is rewarded is repeated. And this is incredibly important. And I want to finish the Febreze story that I left alone. So we talked about the idea that the queue is cleaning, the response is using Febreze, and the reward is what? Well, they weren't selling this stuff like they are today. What happened? Well, in a state of panic, my interpretation based upon how the story was told, they started to do some more research in a last ditch effort to figure out what the heck was going on. And their breakthrough came from observing a woman, ironically enough, in Scottsdale, Arizona. I live in Phoenix, so that's why it's ironic. And what they discovered was this woman answered, I guess, an inquiry because she would use it on a regular basis. And what she would do is she had two teenage boys, and she used the lightly concentrated scent at that time as an indicator for a job well done. So the cue was cleaning up the boys' room. The craving was the smell of the job well done. The response was the cleaning and spraying Febreze, and the reward was the scent. And so they ended up increasing the concentration of scent, and the rest, as they say, is history. So if we're talking about clinically or in a clinical context, excuse me, what is satisfying about patient education? Or let's flip that. What's satisfying about case acceptance? And what are you rewarding and how are you rewarding it? Because these are really important considerations because you know what? If we're not celebrating the impact to our patients that just so happens to be tied with an increase in case acceptance, then it might get lost in the idea that what? This is only about production. And so when we think about making it satisfying, case acceptance is about doing the right thing for the right people at the right time. So what we need to think about is the reward. And if you go back to the Science of Optimism lecture, we talked about the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, and what you focus on, you will see, and what is rewarded is repeated. Are we acknowledging that we're able to best serve these patients by talking about wins in case acceptance or wins in case inserts or wins in changes at the front office and their procedures? You see how this all ties together? So when it comes to your behavior change, I want you to think about how you're going to make it obvious. What is your cue? I want you to think about how you're going to make it attractive, i.e., what are you going to crave? I want you to think about how are you going to make it easy to start the response? And I want you to think about how you're going to make it satisfying because, yeah, what is rewarded is repeated. So your final exercise, if you choose to accept it, is that you're going to think about the elements for your habits. What's going to be obvious, the cue, what's going to be attractive, what's going to be easy, and what's going to make it satisfying. So small changes make big impacts. We talked about that before. And Mr. Hopkins started out in a reality where only 7% of people in the United States had a tube of toothpaste, or more accurately, a can of tooth powder in their medicine cabinet. And according to data from 2019, which I realize is 6 years old now, but 6 years ago, do you know what this market was worth in toothpaste? $17.5 billion from only 7% market share. So what I want to do as we close is that I would like to review what it is we learned today. I then want to share with you what those gifts are. And then I want to tell you a quick story as we wrap up our third of 3 webinars together. So what did we learn today? Well, number one, people during World War I had really bad breath, right? The science of habits has a dental origin. Who knew? That there's a habit loop with a cue, craving, response, and reward. There are 4 laws of habit change, and it will take time to facilitate that change. And that this change is all about integration, not addition, and that small changes over time matter. And so if you would like to get in touch with me, ask questions with me, there's my QR code again. But what gifts do I have for you? Well, the first is my podcast. I have a podcast with Dr. Kyle Stanley, my dear friend, and this is all about wellness and dentistry, mental wellness, personal wellness, and practice wellness. So it's on all platforms. We've recorded over 50 episodes every week since last May. We've been on the air. And the second gift is to help you in your leadership. And so, yes, I have an online course, but guess what? The first lesson is on me. And so you can go to my website, take a look at that first lesson, learn some additional things, and I would be honored if you would do so for me to help you continue on your learning journey. So as we finish, I think it's a fair thing to say that life would be easier if it wasn't for other people. Is that fair? So I want to tell you a quick story. And as in all my stories, they may seem a little unbelievable, but they are true nonetheless without being told with any embellishment. And in 2019, we went to the grocery store on this random Saturday and looked for the cashier named Rose. Why? Because my grandmother's name was Rose, and I happened to notice that one day. And she always greets us and she says, "Hi, guys, how are you? What's going on? Have you traveled lately? Have you talked about me lately?" Because she knows and loves that I tell the story. So on this random Saturday in Rose's aisle, we come in with a full cart. We start putting stuff on the belt. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice a woman, a younger woman, come into the aisle with also a full load of groceries, a baby in the cart, and a toddler in tow. She starts putting stuff on the belt. About 30 to 60 seconds in, all of a sudden, extremely loudly, so much so that it caused me to jump, I hear, "Shoot!" Yeah, not the word she used. I turn around, I notice the baby starts to cry, the toddler starts to fuss, and she's standing there holding a frozen, perishable entree. She must have sensed me looking at her, and she turns and looks at me like the exorcist. And she takes this item without blinking, looking, or saying a word from one hand to the other, puts it on the candy shelf across from Rose. Now, I can guarantee you she got very sidetracked by her children's crying due to her outburst. And I very quietly said, "Rose, hey, can I give this back to you? Because I don't want it to thaw." Okay. So I took this item from the candy shelf, gave it to Rose without saying a word, looking her way, reacting, and then it started. "Who the fudge do you think you are?" Also not the word she used. Little baby in the cart and a toddler in tow. "Why don't you mind your own gosh darn business? Do you work here?" This went on and on and on for 5 minutes because I thought, well, I'm a speaker. I teach communication. I can fix this. And I looked at her and said, "I'm really sorry, ma'am. There must be a miscommunication here. All I was looking to do was give back this perishable item that you clearly didn't want." "It's not perishable. It's frozen. Why don't you mind your own fudging business?" So finally, after 5 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. And I finally looked at her, repeated what I said for one final time. And because I'm human, I said, "And I sincerely hope you have a better day than you've apparently had so far." So what's the point? The point is that the power to change is within you. The point is, as we talked about in the optimism lecture, according to Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that woman took my actions with a certain train of thought that drove emotions, that created an action of screaming at me, that manifested in the opportunity to tell you a story. But I want you to look at the center of the screen because sometimes changing habits, changing mindsets, changing your life can seem very daunting. But the logo in the middle of the screen is my little entity's logo, and it means a lot to me. My little entity is called metamorphosis, which is the change in an organism from one state to the next. The acorn looks nothing like the tree that burst forth from it, but the acorn had everything inside it all along to become that beautiful tree. I firmly believe that about each one of you, and I firmly believe that about me. Habit change, utilizing the four laws and the habit circle is something that can really change not just your practice, but your personal life.